Thank you. I have a lot of questions, so I'll try and limit them and only do the real important ones. First, I have a question.
We think you'll notice that once we get into some of them, that they're all sort of the same question.
Okay. First, I have some questions about death. I grew up in a house where it was kind of dinner conversation. My parents are funeral directors, so perhaps I thought a lot about it growing up, and I still do. When something dies, an animal, a plant, a person, something leaves. I'm under the understanding that everything is source energy.
Yes.
Dead, live, rock, inanimate, and just like you were saying.
Yes.
So what is it that is different about something that goes from what we call this dimension to the next, but we can still see it. We can still see the thing, the body, what's not there anymore.
What your personality is in this physical body is a point of focus. It's a point of focusing of consciousness. And so when a physical death is experienced, and of course you know we tease there is no death, you say, well, there might not be death, but there's a dead body there. What has happened is the consciousness has refocused. Here, in light of what we're talking about here, this is a good way to put it. This personality has been deactivated, while the broader perspective has become activated. Only there's a distortion in that the source energy is always activated. Your soul or inner being is never deactivated, but it is a withdrawal of attention through that apparatus. Now, the thing that makes this a little hard to understand is that this focusing of consciousness occurs whether there is a physical apparatus to go along with it or not. In other words, here we are, a huge body of source energy, of multitudes of perspectives, all culminating here in one focus. And we do not need Esther's body to focus. In other words, we can focus through the fly or through the frog. In other words, perception is perception. And so the thing that is a little tricky in understanding this focusing is that it almost feels like there is the implication that the physical body is necessary in order for the focus to occur. Now here is the leading edge thought. And to the degree that the leading edge thought will occur, that physical body is necessary. In other words, this physical body is the leading edge that allows that broader perspective to flow through and have this finely tuned, infinitesimal, finely tuned is the best words that we can find here, experience. Source energy having a leading edge, finely tuned experience. You see?
So the purpose of the physical body is so that
the
source energy can express on the leading edge.
That would be an accurate statement, but to say the purpose of the physical body is not exactly right, because it's more like the physical body is the result of the source energy thought. In other words, the physical body is so inevitable that it's hard to call it the purpose. The physical body is the result of the desire that has been launched from non-physical. But now we're back into this perpetual motion idea. When you think about this is a universe that is attraction-based, and so it is the desire of the focused personality that summons unto it. And so, you know how man conjures the idea of God, who set this earth in motion. Well, we would like you to think of this God in the sense that the inner you is that God that intended the consciousness that is you forth. And so, as that source energy intended to have the experience that is you, the forming of your body was inspired by the physical format, your parents coming together, and then the thought that was projected from your inner being actually was the beginning of that which is you. But in the moment that you came forth into this environment and began your perceiving, that's when your personal personality attraction began.
And the reason that death feels so painful to us is because we maybe don't understand what it really is?
Certainly. The reason that death or anything feels painful to you is because you use it as the subject to disconnect yourself from life. Think about why death feels so bad. because you are focused upon the absence of that which you want.
Mm-hmm.
Death doesn't feel bad to the beast.
No.
He hasn't programmed himself to push against it. Physical humans keep that vibration activated within themselves. You practice that pain so that it's there to use readily whenever you need it.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, that's what funerals are, for the most part. It's an exercise in practicing grief. And it is our promise to you, it is a learned behavior. It does not come naturally. Watch the little children. They are playing. They want to bring their coloring books. They'd like to bring their Tonka truck. They'd like to play. They don't feel the pain until they look at you and feel your pain. And then they learn their painful behavior. And if they should be so wrong as to giggle or laugh or show a moment of joy in the midst of someone else's pain, they will usually be hushed and discouraged from it, you see. And your words were perfect. It is because it is misunderstood. Death is not understood. Think about the way you practice it. For heaven's sakes, you give people the death penalty. In other words, you see death as a penalty. It is a punishment. So you live and live and live and live, and if you're really bad, we'll kill you right away. And if you're not so bad, then we'll wait and we'll kill you later, or you'll kill yourself in some way. In other words, you will be killed. That is certain. No one will live on, and it won't be good whenever it comes. So let's hold it off as long as possible, and in the process, let's diminish life. Let's worry about death so much that we do not live, and just to make sure, let's practice it on a regular basis.
Well,
so anything death-related is paraded across your newspapers and across your screens as if it is a surprise. In other words, this horrible thing keeps happening, and we have to keep talking about it, as if we talk about it, maybe it will stop happening. And then some will say, well, we're preparing ourselves for death. And we say, we don't see much evidence of that. We don't see very many people really trying to make it something that is palatable. In other words, we see the opposite happening in most cases. You make it something that is horrible. And it isn't something that is horrible. It is something that is natural, something that is the next logical step, something where there is no lapse in consciousness, something that is expanding in nature, something that gives you a big sense of relief, something that feels like life breathing back into you. In other words, the process of death is the most joyful experience any of you will ever experience, ever. Ever. Imagine, in one fell swoop, the release of all doubt and worry and self-judgment and hate and blame and guilt and fear. Imagine that. That feeling of expansive relief of suddenly knowing who you are and knowing your placement in all things and knowing the value that you are and feeling the satisfaction of the life that you have lived and are living and the love of all that exists. In other words, we hope you all die soon. What we really hope is that you allow yourselves to live in life in the way that you will live in death, you see. Yes.
And so we go to that place and we have all that, just what you said, and then we choose to come back here because...
Because from your broader non-physical perspective, this is seen as the most delicious place to be because it is on the leading edge where the action is. It is that juncture that we talked about earlier where life source meets flesh, where thoughts can manifest. It is the culmination of the finely tuned focus. Can you feel the difference between a sort of fleeting thought that may be pleasant enough but fleeting, and a specific thought that is really interesting?
Yes.
And don't you like the interest more than you like the soft fleeting thought? Now, most of you would say yes, unless you're overwhelmed with the details of your life and you're wanting something less intense and you're looking for relief. But it is our promise to you that once you are in alignment with Source, the more specifically you are focused, the more exhilarating it is. That's why you meet so many people, or you hear of them, who are passionate about their work. And most of the world gives them the label of workaholic because they seem imbalanced in their life. The little girl, 12 years old, painting, said, I didn't want to ride my bicycle. I didn't want to go play with friends. I didn't want to do other things. I wanted to paint. I wanted to paint, and I still want to paint. I love to paint. And her passion shows in what she paints. In other words, everybody wants it. It is a physical embodiment of life itself that emanates from that canvas. In other words, you get a sense of it?
I do. I have a 12-year-old just like that.
And so you cannot ever separate yourself from that which is your source. But to the degree that you have learned to allow it, better stated, to the degree that you have not learned not to allow it. In other words, you learn to suppress, and we are wanting to help you unlearn to suppress, which sounds a little bit like deactivating, which can't happen. So what we're really wanting to do is to help you activate who you really are.
I've heard you speak about how all the rockets of desire and how all the thoughts that have ever been thought are still out there.
Yes.
My question is, so in the past when I've been in periods of great depression and had rockets of desire that were unhealthy and not life-giving.
What do you mean by that? A rocket of desire that is unhealthy or not life-giving. What is that about?
A desire to that I wouldn't be here anymore. And I know that death isn't the, is good. But right now I'm really enjoying life, and I want to be here for a little bit longer.
But what do you think? What do you think the desire was?
I think it was relief, and I think there was some punishment going on. I think I wanted to punish myself, for guilt that I was having or not being worthy, those kinds of things. I felt I needed, I needed some pain. I needed to.
Well, as we watch you, all of you, and we see you in a time of despair, the rocket of desire that shoots out of you is not punishment. It is relief from the despair. In other words, when you're confused, you want clarity. You don't want punishment for being confused. And so the reason that we're guiding you here just a little bit is because we do not think that anyone ever desires something that feels bad. We think that sometimes you resign yourself and feel that you can't have otherwise. But the rockets of desires that we're talking about are born from the contrast, and they are always about, this is good. They are always, you're really going to like this. Every rocket of desire, without exception, is a glimpse of what you, the source, desires that has been stimulated from what you are living. That's good. That's so good. In other words, it's a sort of crack of least resistance where who you really are spurted out for just a moment before you covered it up with what you're really thinking and feeling in that moment. That's why we call it a rocket of desire. And so we don't think that you ever deliberately set off a rocket of desire that said, I want to hurt someone or I want to hurt myself. We think that it was a desire for relief of pain that is just clouded because in that moment you can't really see clearly.
That's true.
Yes. So your question about that is...
My question was, are those rockets still out there and can they affect my now?
Every one of them is still out there. But you were asking it in the sense that it was a negative rocket that might negatively affect you. Mm-hmm. And we're wanting you to hear that there have never been, and never will be any negative rockets of desires that shoot out of you. All of them come forth from source. People get this is good. People get sort of mixed up about this because you have so many judgments about what's right and wrong. Mm-hmm. And most everyone will say to someone that they're tutoring, you shouldn't want that, you should want what I want. And if you really pinned them down to it and you would say, well, why should I want what you want? They would say, because what I want you to want is right. And you would say, but how do you really know that? And what it always comes down to is I, your mentor, would feel better if you would want what I want you to want. So it's necessary for you to serve my selfishness rather than your own. You see? Mm-hmm. And so at the basis of this understanding must come the awareness that you are inherently good. And that all of the desires come forth from that part of you, which you are allowing or muting to whatever degree. To the degree that you're allowing them, you soar. To the degree that you are muting them, you don't. And so an objective bystander watching you, when you're full of yourself, might say, she's just full of herself. She's just cocky and arrogant. Or you might say, she's sure-footed and in touch with who she really is. In other words, people who want you to be humble usually want to guide you or control you.